Hello, and welcome to the Light of Navigation. My name is Marguerite, and I'd love to share with you about finding God's goodness, His peace, His presence in any of life's storms. If this channel blesses you, please like and subscribe, pass it on, share it with someone you know who needs encouragement and needs hope. Thank you for taking time to let me share with you another God story today. You know, God can meet a need in the most unexpected or unconventional ways. Sometimes it can seem crazy in our way of viewing things. We can have preconceived ideas about how God operates. For 5 years after a divorce that I went through, I struggled with trying to start a floral shop business and build a customer base to generate some sort of income for my son and I. It was tough. My son and I literally lived from shop order to shop order financially. There were many financial challenges. It was frightening to step out and trust God financially when I had just divorced. And at one point in this journey, I found myself sitting in a judge's chamber at the local city courthouse one day. The local hospital's lawyer was claiming I had failed to pay a large hospital debt. When it was my turn to speak to the accusations, I simply placed a large handful of carefully folded receipts, 2 years' worth, on the table in front of the judge. Not one payment had been missed. The look on the lawyer's face was priceless. It was obvious he was stunned and he was embarrassed. When the receipts were totaled, I had actually overpaid them $400 or $500. Of course, I never saw that refund. The judge took one look at the stack of receipts and dismissed the case against me with a judgment satisfied being declared. A few days later, I applied for a small personal loan at my bank to meet various basic needs. What I did not know was that the hospital debt was on my credit record still as unpaid. The bank had checked my credit, of course, and the supposed bad debt listed had not been removed. The bank's loan official requested the judgment-satisfied document from the court hearing to be able to proceed with the loan. I did not have the court document in my possession. No one informed me that I needed to pick up a copy of the judge's decree when I left the court that day. When I contacted the city court about the paperwork, I was told that the hospital's lawyer had taken it instead. My next step was calling to ask for the return of the document that belonged to me, but the lawyer refused to return it. His refusal to return it to me was one of the most helpless moments that I have ever felt. Legally, it wasn't his to take. How would I fight this lawyer for the document? I certainly had no money to hire an attorney of my own to pursue it. I desperately needed the loan, and the judgment-satisfied document was the key. I was crestfallen and discouraged. I really wondered if the attorney had taken it to spite me, because I had embarrassed him substantially in front of the presiding judge that day. The bank's loan officer listened compassionately as I told her why I could not produce the legal documentation they needed. She politely told me that the bank's hands were tied and there could be no loan. When I got home that day, I cried out to God for justice in a passionate prayer. To this day, I can recall where I was standing in the hallway of the house at that moment. All these years later, I reminded him that the biblical scriptures spoke of him as a God of justice and an advocate for the widow and the orphan. Ironically, the word advocate is another word for lawyer. I had declared that the hospital had their lawyer, but I had my own, Jesus Christ. 2 hours later, the loan officer from the bank called me, and I was informed that on my behalf, and unknown to me, the bank's lawyers contacted the hospital's attorney and demanded the judgment-satisfied document be returned. And it was returned post-haste. The bank now had possession of it and asked me to pick it up at my convenience. In addition, the loan I had asked for was granted. It was an incredible feeling of joy and elation to know that God moved on my behalf so wonderfully. I had prayed and cried out for something in prayer that, truthfully, deep down I hadn't expected it to come to pass. God does make a way when there seems to be no way. God had advocated for me swiftly and powerfully. I was shocked by the truth and action that God is an advocate as described in the Bible. It was truly now an experienced reality, not just words on paper in the Scriptures. Some needed or hoped for justice in our lives seems to come slowly, or it looks like it's been delayed long term. And I was learning that there are times when it can come through quickly. It's an incredible feeling to know He cares about the injustices or harm that we go through. In addition, that fall, the propane tank for our trailer home had finally hit the empty point. On its gauge, empty once again. I had no financial means to have it refilled. I could not cook without it, and heat was needed for the approaching winter as well. And I've heard stories of how God would multiply food or resources for others when there was not enough on hand, when they prayed for it. With that in mind, and in desperation, I placed my hands on that tank and prayed, asking God to multiply its contents, to keep the propane going until I had the funds to buy more. And I know y'all are wondering what these God encounters I've mentioned have to do with the title of this video about my van and the property tax. Just by itself, it would seem random, I suppose. But this was in a succession of events and God encounters that frequently occurred during that 5-year period that I've been sharing about with you here. They may seem small, but I cannot forget them, and I'm certainly not mentioning them all here. There's many more. But back to my story. Months later, I had received a notice that my property taxes would shortly be past due. There was a deadline for payment. It was a $650 tax bill, and I was broke and now facing the possible loss of our home and our land. My first husband and I had purchased it just after we married. It was a small half-acre parcel of land with a large garden. And that garden fed an entire neighborhood at one point and was graced with beautiful tall pine trees and fruit trees as well. I spent many hours keeping the yard meticulously groomed, the garden weeded and watered. I had poured my heart and soul into the land after my husband died. The hard work kept me busy as I grieved. It was now literally the very last day to pay those taxes. And there I was, crying out to God in prayer as I drove my van through town, running multiple errands. I prayed passionately and loudly as I sat at the next stoplight and poured my heart out, asking Him to meet the financial need. I also secretly looked both ways to make sure no one was watching and would think I was a crazy lady. As I pulled into the parking lot of the local feed store, an elderly woman pulled out to leave. Not seeing me enter the parking area, she struck my van on the passenger side as she backed out. up in arms and upset, she quickly came over to apologize to me. And the woman began talking about a teenage son that she and her husband had put on their insurance policy recently. He had been involved in a recent accident, which in turn had caused their insurance premiums to skyrocket. She carefully asked if I would defer calling in an accident report and take a cash payment instead for any repairs. In the meantime, I'm thinking that this damage to my delivery van was adding insult to injury when I couldn't pay my taxes that day as well. Normally, I would have refused and insisted on a report. As I stood there looking at the dent, I realized it was small and barely visible. I decided then that the best route in the situation was to take her offer. Her desperation was genuine, and her son was evidently costing them a great deal financially. Besides, I thought to myself, I could use the money instead. With her phone number in hand, I drove to 2 different auto repair shops and chose the lowest estimate. True to her word, a couple hours later, the woman paid me for the repairs. You guessed it. The exact amount needed to pay my property taxes. The tax bill was paid just before the courthouse closed that evening, and just before the end of the final day that it was due. And by the way, the propane tank kept working for 2 additional months with the gauge on empty the entire time until I had the funds to refill it. We all receive dents or dings in this life, and shortfalls and injustices, they come and go. Some of them are large and some are small, but they can sure pay off when God is present and orchestrating it all.